Part 1. My name is unknown. I do not want anyone to know it. I am not famous. I have never been in the news. But I have seen something that no one will believe. It changed my life, and I will never be the same again. I used to be a sailor. I worked on a ship. My life was normal. I liked the sea. The water was calm, and the waves were relaxing. I had no fear, but that all changed when I escaped from a war. During the First World War, I was captured by the enemy. It was a dark time. I was afraid. But one night, I managed to escape. I took a small boat and left the enemy ship. I was alone on the ocean. There was no land in sight. There was nothing around me, just water as far as I could see. Days went by. I had no food and no water. The sun was hot, and I was very tired. I thought I would die. I was ready to give up. But something strange happened. The sea changed. The water became thick, and the boat stopped moving. It was like the ocean itself was turning into mud. I was stuck. I looked around. The water was gone. It was not the ocean anymore. It was a huge, muddy land. There were hills of black mud all around me. I did not understand what was happening. How could the ocean disappear? How could land rise from the sea? It made no sense. But I had no choice. I had to leave my boat. I started walking. I walked on this strange land for hours. My feet sank in the mud. The air smelled bad, like something old and rotten. I felt scared and confused, but I kept walking. I had to find something, anything. I needed to know where I was. After a long time, I saw something. It was far away, but I could see it clearly. It was a big rock, or maybe a statue. It was tall, black, and it stood out against the muddy ground. I decided to walk toward it. Maybe it would help me understand this strange place. As I got closer, I could see that it was not just a rock. It was something more. It looked old, very old. There were strange carvings on it, shapes I did not know, symbols I had never seen before. They looked like they told a story, but I could not read them. I stood there, staring at the rock, feeling confused and scared. I had no idea what I was about to discover. My life was about to change forever. Part 2. I was now walking through the strange land. It was silent. No birds, no wind, just me and the mud. I felt very alone. The air was hot and heavy. It smelled bad, like something dead. I kept moving, even though I was tired and scared. I didn't know where I was, but I had to keep going. As I walked, I began to think about what had happened to me before. It seemed like a dream. I had been on a ship, just like always. It was a regular day. The sky was clear and the sea was calm. We were sailing across the ocean, going about our business. But then, everything changed. One day, we saw a large ship on the horizon. It was a German ship. We were at war, and the German Navy was very powerful. We knew we were in trouble. The Germans captured us. They took our ship, and they took us as prisoners. For days, I was held in a small room on the German ship. I didn't know what was going to happen. The Germans didn't tell us anything. I felt lost and scared. But one night, something happened. There was a loud sound, like an explosion. The ship started to move strangely. I thought we were under attack. The Germans were yelling, and the ship was shaking. I took my chance to escape. I ran out of the room and found a small lifeboat. No one was watching me. Everyone was busy. I climbed into the boat and pushed off. The sea was rough. and the night was dark. I rode for hours, not knowing where I was going. I just wanted to get away from the German ship. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up, the ship was gone. The sea was calm again. I looked around, but there was nothing. Just water everywhere. I was all alone. Days passed by, and I had no food and no water. The sun was hot, and I felt weak. I was sure I would die out there, floating in the middle of the ocean. But then, I noticed something strange. The water was changing. It was becoming thick and muddy. The boat wasn't moving anymore. I looked around, and I could see the land rising up from the sea. It was like the earth itself was pushing up, creating a new island. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. I got out of the boat and started walking on this strange new land. The ground was soft, and my feet sank in the mud. I had never seen anything like this before. There were no trees, no plants, no animals. Just mud and rocks. It felt like another world. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept walking. I hoped I would find something. Maybe there were people here. Maybe there was a way to get back to the sea. But there was nothing. The land seemed to go on forever. Then, after hours of walking, I saw something in the distance. It was a tall, black shape standing against the horizon. I couldn't tell what it was, but I knew I had to see it. I started walking toward it. As I got closer, I could see it was a large monolith. It was like a giant stone, standing alone in the middle of the mud. It was covered in strange carvings, symbols I didn't understand. They looked old, very old. I could feel something strange about this place, something ancient and powerful. I felt a deep sense of fear, but also curiosity. What was this place? How had it come out of the sea? I knew I had to find out more. I touched the stone, and it was cold. The carvings were deep, like they had been there for a long time. I looked around, but there was no sign of life. No sound, no movement. Just the quiet, heavy air and the strange stone. I felt like I was being watched, but there was no one there. I stood still, feeling more alone than ever before. Part 3. I stood in front of the giant stone for a long time. The strange carvings were all over it. The symbols seemed to tell a story, but I could not read them. They made me feel uneasy, like I was seeing something I was not meant to see. I could feel a strange energy in the air. It was as if the stone was alive, watching me. But I was alone. I started to wonder if I was dreaming. Maybe I had been on the ocean for too long. Maybe the sun had made me lose my mind. But everything felt real. The mud under my feet, the heavy air, the strange shapes on the stone, it all seemed too real to be a dream. I looked around again. The land was still empty. Just mud and rocks. There were no trees, no plants, no animals. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I had never felt silence like this before. It was the kind of silence that made you want to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was stuck on this strange island, and I had no idea how to leave. After a while, I decided to move on. I couldn't stay by the stone forever. I needed to explore more of the island. Maybe I would find something that could help me understand where I was, or maybe I would find a way to get back to the sea. I started walking again, my feet sinking into the mud with each step. As I walked, I noticed something strange. The ground was different. It was still muddy, but it wasn't just mud anymore. There were small, shiny objects in the mud. At first, I thought they were just rocks. But when I bent down to pick one up, I realized it wasn't a rock. It was a piece of something. something man-made. It looked like a small piece of metal, but it was shaped in a way I had never seen before. It was smooth, with strange markings on it. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't look like it belonged here. I put it in my pocket and kept walking. The more I walked, the more pieces I found. Some were metal, some were stone, and some were made of materials I didn't even recognize. It was like I was walking through the remains of a city that had been buried in the mud for thousands of years. But there were no buildings, no roads, no signs of life, just these strange pieces scattered across the land. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was getting closer to something. Something big. The air felt heavier, and the sky seemed darker, even though the sun was still high. It was as if the world around me was changing, and I was walking toward the center of it. Then I saw it. In the distance, rising out of the mud, was something huge. It was much bigger than the stone I had seen before. It was taller than any building I had ever seen, and it seemed to stretch up into the sky. As I got closer, I could see that it wasn't just one piece of stone. It was a massive structure, like a temple or a tower. The carvings on it were like the ones I had seen on the smaller stone, but they were much larger and more detailed. There were pictures of strange creatures that looked like they came from the sea. They had long, thin bodies and large, round eyes. They looked like they were swimming through the air, moving in and out of the mud. I felt a deep sense of fear as I looked at the carvings. These creatures were not like anything I had ever seen before. They were not human. They were something else, something ancient and powerful. I had a terrible feeling that they were connected to the island somehow. I stepped closer to the large structure and touched it. The stone was cold, just like the first one. But this time, when I touched it, I heard a sound. It was a deep, rumbling sound, like something moving under the ground. It was faint, but it was there. I looked around, but I still couldn't see anything. The sound was coming from below me, from deep inside the earth. My heart started to race. I felt like something was about to happen, something I didn't understand. I backed away from the structure and tried to calm down, but the sound kept getting louder. Part 4. I backed away from the large structure, my heart racing. The sound from below was growing louder. It was deep and low, like the earth itself was moving. I tried to listen carefully, but it didn't sound like anything I had heard before. It wasn't the sound of a machine, or wind, or anything natural. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. It was a small shake at first, but then it grew stronger. I struggled to keep my balance. I looked around, terrified, but there was nothing. Just a huge stone structure and the empty land. But the shaking was getting worse. I could see the mud around me start to crack, and small rocks fell down from the structure. I wanted to run. Every part of my body was telling me to get away from this place, to escape from whatever was happening. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, standing there, watching as the ground started to break apart. Then, without warning, the sound stopped. The shaking stopped too. Everything was quiet again. I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to understand what had just happened. For a moment, I thought it was over. Maybe it was just an earthquake, or maybe the strange island was playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew something worse was coming. I could feel it. Before I could react, I heard another sound. This time, it was not coming from below. It was coming from the sea. I turned and looked out toward the horizon. The water was far away, but I could see something moving. At first, it was just a shadow, something big moving under the surface of the water. But as I watched, the shadow grew larger and closer. My stomach dropped. I knew whatever it was heading straight for the island. The water began to rise, as if something massive was pushing it forward. I could see waves forming in the distance, but these weren't normal waves. They were too big, too strong. It was like the ocean was being pulled toward the island by some invisible force. I took a step back, my eyes fixed on the water. As it got closer, I could make out more details. The thing moving under the water was not a ship, and it wasn't a whale. It was something else, something much larger. I could see its shadow stretching out, its body dark and massive. Then, it broke the surface. For the first time, I saw it clearly. A huge slimy head rose from the water. It was covered in scales, and its eyes were big, round, and empty. Were like the eyes of a fish, but much larger, and they seemed to glow in the dim light. The creature's mouth was wide, filled with sharp teeth that gleamed as it rose up from the sea. I stood there, frozen in fear. I had never seen anything like it before. It was like a monster from the depths of the ocean, something that didn't belong in this world. Its body was long and twisted, like a giant snake, but with arms and hands that reached out toward the land. I could see its slimy skin, glistening as it moved closer. The creature's head turned slowly, looking directly at the large structure I had touched earlier. It seemed like it knew this place, like it was drawn to the stone. I watched, horrified, as the creature's massive body pulled itself out of the water and onto the muddy land. Its movements were slow, but strong. I could feel the ground shake with each step it took. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My legs wouldn't move. I just stood there, watching as this giant monster came toward the island. Its long arms stretched out, grabbing at the mud, pulling itself closer to the structure. Its eyes never left the stone. It seemed like it was waking up, like it had been asleep for a long time and was finally coming back to life. As the creature moved, I saw its body in full. It was even larger than I had thought. Its long tail dragged behind it, leaving deep marks in the mud. The air was thick with the smell of salt and rot. It was a horrible, choking smell that made it hard to breathe. I knew I had to move. If I didn't, the creature would see me, and I didn't want to know what would happen then. But my body wouldn't listen. I was trapped in place, watching in horror as this monster came closer and closer. I stood there, frozen with fear, as the massive creature moved closer. The sound of its body sliding across the mud was loud and terrifying. Each movement was slow, but powerful. I could feel the ground shake beneath me with every step it took. The creature's head, with those large, empty eyes, was focused on the stone structure. It didn't seem to notice me, but I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. Suddenly, the creature let out a deep, rumbling sound. It wasn't like any noise I had heard before. It was low and echoed across the island, like the sound of the earth breaking open. The air felt even heavier, and I had to cover my ears. The creature seemed to be calling to something deep below the ground. I didn't understand what it was doing, but the sound filled me with a horrible sense of dread. I tried to step back, but my legs were weak. I knew I had to get away from the creature, but it felt like the island itself was trapping me here. The mud seemed to hold my feet in place, making it hard to move. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. I kept watching the creature, hoping it wouldn't notice me. The creature began to move again. its long arms reaching toward the stone. I could see its slimy skin shining in the dim light, and the smell of rot and salt grew stronger. Its claws scraped against the stone, and it let out another low sound, as if it recognized this place. It was like it had been here before, like it had some connection to the strange carvings on the stone. I finally managed to pull my feet free from the mud and started to move away. Slowly, I took one step at a time, trying not to make any noise. I didn't want the creature to notice me. My body was shaking with fear, but I had to keep moving. The further I got from the creature, the better. But as I tried to escape, the ground suddenly shifted beneath me. I lost my balance and fell down into the mud with a loud splash. My heart stopped. The sound was loud, too loud. I looked up, terrified, and saw the creature's head turn toward me. Its glowing eyes locked on mine, and I knew it had seen me. My blood turned cold. The creature stopped moving toward the stone and turned its whole body toward me. I could see the muscles in its long arms tensing up, ready to strike. I tried to get up, but the mud was thick, and I couldn't move fast enough. Panic was taking over. My mind was racing, trying to find a way out, but it was too late. The creature let out another loud roar, its mouth opening wide to reveal rows of sharp teeth. It started to move toward me, its long body sliding across the mud. Each step shook the ground. I could see its massive claws digging into the earth as it pulled itself closer. I tried to crawl away, but the mud made it impossible to move quickly. I thought this was the end. The creature was too big, too strong. There was no way I could escape. But just as the creature was about to reach me, something happened. The ground started to shake again, but this time it was different. It was stronger, like the whole island was moving. The creature stopped, its head turning to look at the ground. The shaking grew worse, and I could see cracks forming in the mud. Suddenly, the ground beneath the creature gave way. A huge hole opened up, and the creature fell into the earth with a loud crash. I watched in shock as the monster disappeared into the ground, its massive body swallowed by the island itself. The air was filled with dust and mud, and the sound of the creature's roar echoed as it fell deeper into the earth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The creature was gone, just like that. The island had somehow swallowed it whole. I lay there in the mud, breathing heavily, my heart still racing. The shaking slowly stopped, and everything became quiet again. The heavy, awful silence returned. I stayed on the ground for a long time, too afraid to move. I couldn't understand what had just happened. The creature, the stone, the shaking, it all felt like a nightmare. But I knew it was real. I had seen it with my own eyes. I had felt the ground give way beneath the creature. I had heard its terrifying roar as it disappeared into the earth. Finally, after what felt like hours, I managed to get to my feet. My whole body was shaking, and I could barely stand. The island was quiet again, but I knew I had to leave. I couldn't stay here any longer. Whatever had happened, I didn't want to find out more. I started walking, my legs trembling beneath me. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. The island was silent again, but I couldn't forget what I had just seen. The creature's huge, slimy body, the deep roar, and the way the ground swallowed it up. None of it felt real, but I knew it had happened. I had to leave this place. I had to find a way back to the sea. I didn't know where to go. The island was just mud and rocks as far as I could see. There were no trees, no hills, no landmarks to guide me. I looked around, hoping to see the boat I had come in, but it was gone. Lost somewhere in the mud. My heart sank. Without the boat, how would I get back to the water? I kept walking, pushing through the thick mud. Each step was hard, and my body felt heavy. The smell of the creature still hung in the air salt and rot. It made me feel sick, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. The island felt different now. It wasn't just strange. It felt dangerous, alive in a way that I didn't understand. I knew I didn't belong here, and I had to get away before something else happened. After what felt like hours, I saw something in the distance. At first, I thought it was just another rock, but as I got closer, I realized it was my boat. It was stuck in the mud, half buried, but it was still there. Relief flooded through me. I ran toward it, my feet sinking deeper into the mud with each step. When I reached the boat, I pulled it free from the mud with all the strength I had left. It was hard work, and my arms ached, but I managed to get it loose. I looked around one last time, making sure the creature was really gone. The island was still quiet, but I could feel the weight of something watching me. I climbed into the boat, grabbed the oars, and began to row. The sea was calm, but the sky was dark. Heavy clouds were gathering overhead, and I could hear the distant sound of thunder. I rowed as fast as I could, my muscles burning with each stroke. The island began to fade behind me, but I couldn't relax. I didn't know if the creature would come back. I didn't know if something worse was waiting out in the ocean. As I rowed, my mind went back to the creature. What was it? Where had it come from? It wasn't like anything I had ever heard of before. It wasn't just an animal. It was something ancient, something powerful. The stone structure, the carvings, the way the ground shook, everything about the island felt old, as if it had existed long before humans. I thought about the strange symbols on the stone. They weren't just random marks. They told a story I couldn't understand. But whatever those symbols meant, I knew they were connected to the creature. The way the creature had looked at the stone, the way it had moved toward it, it was as if the stone was calling to it, bringing it back to life. I shuddered at the thought. The hours passed slowly. The sea was calm, but the sky was growing darker. I had no idea where I was, and the boat felt so small in the vast ocean. I kept rowing, hoping to find land, but there was nothing. Just water stretching out endlessly in every direction. Eventually, exhaustion took over. My arms were too weak to keep rowing, and my eyes were heavy with sleep. I didn't want to stop, but I had no choice. I lay down in the boat, staring up at the dark clouds above me. The sound of the waves was the only thing I could hear. I closed my eyes, hoping I would wake up far from the island, far from the horror I had seen. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The sun was rising, casting a pale light across the sea. I sat up, my body sore and tired. The island was gone, nothing but a distant memory. But the fear was still there, deep inside me. I didn't know if I would ever escape it. As I drifted across the water, I wondered if anyone would believe me. How could I explain what had happened? The creature, the stone, the island, it all sounded like a nightmare. But I knew the truth. I had seen it with my own eyes, and I would never forget. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to leave the ocean behind. I would never sail again. Whatever that creature was, whatever lived on that island, I couldn't risk coming face to face with it again. Part 5. I eventually found my way back to civilization. I don't remember much about how I got there. The days after the encounter all blur in my mind, as if they were part of the same nightmare. I was found floating in my small boat by a passing ship. They brought me aboard, asking questions, but I couldn't answer. My mind was still trapped on that island, with the creature, with the horror I had witnessed. For weeks, I stayed in a hospital, recovering from exhaustion and shock. I tried to tell the doctors and the people around me about the island, about the creature I had seen, but no one believed me. They thought I was mad, that I had imagined everything during my time at sea. They said it was hallucinations from hunger and thirst, that my mind had made up the whole story. I stopped trying to explain. I knew the truth, and no amount of disbelief would change what I had seen. The creature was real, the island was real, and the strange stone structure was real. Even though I had escaped, the memory stayed with me. Every night, I dreamt of the creature's eyes, glowing in the dark, and its deep roar echoing through the ground. As time passed, I tried to return to a normal life, but it was impossible. I couldn't forget the terror I had experienced. Every shadow, every strange sound reminded me of the creature. I avoided the sea, never going near the water again. The thought of sailing, of being anywhere near the ocean, filled me with dread. I knew that something ancient and terrible was lurking out there, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I also became obsessed with trying to understand what I had seen. I spent hours in libraries, searching through old books and records, looking for any mention of creatures like the one I had encountered. I read about ancient gods, forgotten myths, and lost civilizations, hoping to find some explanation. But nothing matched the thing I had seen. It was something beyond human understanding, something older and darker than anything in the books. Despite all my efforts, I couldn't find any answers. The more I searched, the more I realized that what I had seen was not part of any known world. It was from somewhere else, somewhere that humans were never meant to go. The island, the creature, the strange symbols on the stone, they were all part of a mystery that I would never solve. In the end, I had to accept that I would never fully understand what had happened. The creature, the island, the strange forces at play, they were beyond human knowledge. All I could do was live with the fear, knowing that something dark and powerful existed out there, just beyond our reach. The memory of the island haunted me, but I knew I had been lucky to escape with my life. Years have passed since that day, but the terror has never left me. I live far from the sea now, in a small, quiet town where I can pretend that the world is safe and normal. But I know the truth. I know that somewhere, deep beneath the ocean, the creature still sleeps, waiting for the day when it will rise again. And I know that I will never forget the horror of that moment when I stood on the island and looked into the eyes of something ancient and monstrous.